Okay guys, so what I've done is I've separated all my pieces. I have the ring, which is also called a box. It depends on which country you're from, believe it or not. I've been to several countries where they call it a ring, and here in the US we generally call it a box, so I don't know which way you call it, but anyway, I think you get the gist. And so what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to go and measure this, and when I measure it, I'm going to measure it from the seam all the way around to where I cut the other seam. Okay, so where I cut the other seam was right there at 56.5, and I have to add a 1/2 inch for this sew line and a 1/2 inch for this sew line. So I've already written my numbers down here. It's 57.5, and because it is a 2-inch cushion, that we're making it a 2-inch cushion, we're going to go ahead and measure this 2 inches, and we're going to add a 1/2 inch on each side. So there's the 2 inches. We're going to add a 1/2 inch on this side and a 1/2 inch on that side. And this 2-inch line right here will be our sew line, which I'll show you that. So basically we need 3 inches. Hopefully that's clear. Anyway, then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and measure the zipper. And when we measure the zipper from beginning to end is 18.5. And so as I did, I wrote 19.5. And I'm going to go ahead and measure this distance right here. And this distance right here, believe it or not, is just under an inch. Just barely. So we call it an inch. And then you need your fold under and your 1/2 inch seam on each side. I generally go with 2 inches. I go with a 1/2 inch on each side because that gives me plenty of room if I want to make it a hidden zipper or not. Now, next thing we're going to do, because we're done measuring that, is we're going to measure our welt. It should be about 1.5 inches in my experience. So our welt is going to be 1.5 inches. Okay, so we have to do 1.5 inches by the length of the welt. Now, obviously, the length of the welt should be 56.5 at 18.5. So let's take a look and see if that's right. And you know, you could do the math and go 56.5 plus 18.5 is 75. So essentially, we could make sure that this is 75 inches. So there's 60. And what I generally do is I generally take these two and bud them up and let go of that side to continue down. And look at that, 75 inches. So we need 1.5 by 75 inches for the welt. Now when we do this, we're going to need a top welt and a bottom welt, which we have both welt cords here, and that I removed from the other cushion. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut 1.5 by 75 inches out of each fabric that we've chosen for our top and our bottom. Now once I took everything apart, I have the bottom and I used it. I put it on the chair. It's perfect. It's a perfect fit. So what I did was I took our first fabric, this one right here, and I laid it on top of the fabric. And I know you can't see my marks because I used soapstone, and soapstone generally disappears, but I drew this out completely, 100% all the way around. And then I drew a 1/2 inch out all the way around. This line right here that I have, like I said, you can't see it. I wish you could. But this line that I have right here is my sew line. So what that's telling me is that's the line that I'm going to want to sew on all the way around to make this cushion this size and this shape. Okay, once I cut out this piece, I then laid it on top of the other piece to get the other side of the cushion. I'd like to say top or bottom, but they've decided that this way they can have essentially whatever color decor they want. If they want it this burgundy color, or maybe they want to do their bedroom in greens, then they can use this side. But I laid it on top of this, I drew it out, and I went ahead and cut the same exact pattern. Your top and bottom, obviously, depending on the situation, because sometimes if you're working with a boat that has an angle, your top might be larger than your bottom, or your bottom might be larger than your top. You just have to measure what space you have available. Anyway, so back to the cushion. Okay, so now my next plan of attack is to get these measurements taken care of and cut those pieces out, and then we'll make the welt and we'll put the cushion together. Okay, before I get started on that, I'm going to go ahead and remove this zipper, because that way I've got everything ready and taken apart. Now that we have done this, this cushion bottom and top, we're going to go ahead and toss that aside. And we've measured our welt, so we're going to go ahead and toss that aside and get those out of our way. Now what tools you're going to need to get going here is you're going to need a straight edge, okay? And you're going to need a measuring tape, a pencil to mark your fabric, or soapstone, a pen, a paper, and scissors. This should be everything that you need to work on the stage of the project that we're working on right now. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video while I take apart this zipper, and then I'll come right back. Okay, now we're going to begin doing the measurement for the welt. Now our fabric that we have is only 60 inches. So because of that, what I plan to do is I plan to go ahead and do one 56 and a half, and then do one 18 and a half. This way it'll go to the corners of the back, and I don't think that anybody will even notice that there's an overlay, and I will add an extra ½ inch for sewing it together and doing the stretch. So what I'm going to do essentially is I'm going to flip it over, and I need 1½ inches by 56 and a half inches. Actually, I'm going to do 57. So essentially I'm going to get my measurement. Now there's a lot of ways you can do this. At home I use a square, and I make sure 100% that there is a straight line right here. But because I don't have my tools, what I'm doing is I'm lining it up on the square on this mat right now. I'm actually at my in-laws, and they do a lot of quilting, and so I'm going to be able to take this and mark it and make sure that I get an exact line to start with. And the reason why I do this is because I want to have a straight line, because the welt, you're going to fold it over the welt cord and you're going to sew it down. Now I do again have a special foot for this, and I recommend if you're going to be doing a lot of things with welt that you get the special foot. I'll be happy to show you mine, and I don't know if you'll be able to find them. Mine is from, I think I've had it for 20 years. I've been lucky enough that I have brought my sewing machine with me, so I can go ahead and do a project while I was here. I didn't plan on it being this, but I'm certainly glad that I had my welt foot with me. Okay, now what I've done is I've cut that straight line, and I have lined it up with the line on the graph. Now there's other ways you can do this if you don't have the luxury of having a quilter's mat. But so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get your 1½ inches, which if you look up here, that'll show you where your 1½ inches. But another thing you can do is you can take your tape measure and put it at 1½ inches. I normally, like I said, have a square, which makes this so much easier. And you'll check, see 1½ inches right there. You're going to go down here and you're going to check your 1.5 inches. It's right at 1.5 inches. You're going to check down here. It's right at 1.5 inches. Then you'll go back up to the top and make sure you didn't move it. And as you can tell, it is right at 1.5 inches. So this is where you're going to mark. Now, I do use soapstone for most everything, but it won't work on this fabric, so I'm using a colored pencil. And you can use colored pencils, crayons, marking pens. Now, be careful with marking pens, especially with vinyl. But it does work. In some circumstances, you just cannot get anything that shows really well on the fabric. Now I'm just using a standard black colored pencil right now. And my next thing I'm going to do is, see, I can see my line. You may not be able to on the video, but I can see my line. Now next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and do the second half of this, and then I'm going to cut that out. I'll pause the video just so I can get that done really quickly. Okay, I have cut out all the pieces I need for both the burgundy as well as the floral print. Okay, now that I have those put together, we can do the welt, but what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and do the piece for the box / ring, whatever you want to call it. And that's going to be the 57.5 by 3 inch, as well as the two pieces that are 19.5 by 1.5 inch. And I'm going to go ahead and pause while I get the fabric. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start with our 57.5 by 3 inch. And because I have these lines up here at the top and I have this lined up directly with the mat, I can just find that 3 inch mark. And then I can double check down here because it's a little bit farther away. And so my 3 inch mark is right here where I have it. And this should be 3 inches all the way up. And if you double check that, you have 3 inches exactly. Then you can go ahead and mark your line. Now I'm putting this on the back of the fabric, you know, to make sure that there's no way it's ever going to be visible. Also, you want to look if your fabric is directional or has a pattern. Now this fabric does kind of have a weave that goes in a vertical, so I want that vertical to go across sideways or horizontal on the cushion. So I've made sure to lay my fabric out to where I have this length rather than going up and down. I have this fabric weave going vertical on the cushion, so it follows the pattern of the curve on the cushion. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and get this piece finished up and get that cut out, and then we'll move on to the pieces for the zipper. Now I did put my line all the way at the 57.5 mark. One thing I do want to say is commonly you'll hear me say sew line, cut line. A lot of times what I do to make sure that I'm getting everything as accurate as I possibly can is I will actually add a 1/2 inch line right here on each side. So I'll have that, and that will be my sew line. And the reason why I do that, see, that's my sew line right there. Okay, so I will actually add this all the way down on both sides. This way I have 1/2 inch on each side so that I can sew directly on that line and I'm getting my exact numbers that I want. That way you don't have the cushion be a little fatter in one spot or a little skinnier in one spot. Now, some people don't do this. Some people use the measurement tool on their sewing machine. But I have found sometimes your fabric moves, and you might not notice it. And it's just like when you're doing a French seam and you have the seam on the top. Sometimes you don't realize you're a little bit away. In a future video, I'll try to do some vinyl, and I'll try to do that French seam, and I can show you a trick to how you can go straight down and make sure that you're hitting the exact distance from the line, from the center line, because a French seam is kind of tricky. You have your fabric that you put together, and then your seam right next to it on each side. So it can be really tricky to make sure that you have the exact distance. So anyway, that's something I'll cover in another video, but I just wanted to make sure that I showed you what a difference in a sew line and a cut line are. I know it may sound simple to a lot of people, but to a complete beginner, which right now I'm doing, the classes I'm doing, I'm trying to focus on hitting all levels. You know, I want to hit the business side of building your business, and that's up and coming, but I also want to help those complete beginners as well as the people that are in the middle. Some of you have joined my course because you want to learn a specific thing, and you know, for the classes that I'm teaching, I'm trying to kind of give you just a basics. This course is going to be the basics. It's going to cover all different types of aspects, but with that said, I want to make sure that everybody walks away with some valuable information from this. From the free classes as well as the course that's coming up in just a few weeks. I believe the free classes are going to start about mid-month of October. So let's continue on anyway. So I've got part of this. I'm going to go ahead and get the pieces cut out real quickly for the zipper, and then I'll come back. Okay, so now we've gotten everything together. So we have our box, our welt cord, our top, and our bottom right here. Okay, so we have all of our pieces that we need, everything we need, plus the zipper to make this cushion. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get the sewing machine set up and get ready for that and come back.